All right, so this is the Pinball Capital out in Stone Park, Illinois. Compared to some other videos, I'm not actually going to spend a ton of time going over individual games and their kind of, quirks, because pretty much every machine on the floor here was flawless, but I will kind of touch back on that point again, probably later in the video. I really want to spend more time talking about the location itself because it's actually kind of interesting if you are familiar with the Chicagoland area and pinball in general. For a really long time, Illinois and especially up in Chicago, people who live here and who play pinball have always kind of been spoiled for choice, but not really. It's kind of hard to explain. There's a lot of pinball arcades out here in Chicago, but a majority of them have kind of a limited selection. You'll probably only ever find like maybe around maybe 5 to 15 games, which again is a decent amount, but for somebody who plays a lot of pinball and travels a lot, I noticed that there's a lot of arcades, especially in other states, that have a rather large selection of games, which can be really nice, especially if you are looking to experience a lot of different eras of pinball. And for the longest time, there really wasn't anything like that in Chicago. That you do have kind of Galloping Ghost pinball, but their maintenance is very inconsistent, and a lot of the time they'll move things around and they won't level the games, and it kind of just becomes unplayable, which is really unfortunate. It really just seems to depend on when they get their maintenance out. You have places like Inturium, but they've been kind of falling off a little bit. They haven't really been putting as much attention into their pinball, which is kind of understandable considering they're looking to make more money on the redemption side. And, you just kind of have little miscellaneous places here and there, which typically have anywhere between, again, like 5 to 10 games. But a lot of the time, these games are going to be Sterns, modern Sterns, stuff like that, which, again, isn't necessarily a problem. Stern does a really good job with their games. But, if you are looking to play more than just the run-of-the-mill top earners from Stern, there really aren't too many options in the Chicagoland area. I know Logan is also a pretty popular arcade, Logan Arcade. I've done a video on that. But like I said, their selection is kind of limited, and their selection also changes quite frequently, so you almost never really know what you're going to get when you go there. That's more of a hangout spot, personally, than a pinball location, if I was to make an opinion on it, but it's still a really great place nonetheless. This location changes all of that. They have a ton of games from a variety of eras. As you can kind of see, everything's just kind of, I don't want to say randomly placed, but you definitely will have, a modern game next to an 80s game, next to an electromechanical game, as you can kind of see here, which is really cool. And a lot of these games are all in fantastic condition. You can see this one, I didn't really get a close-up of the playfield, but a lot of these electromechanicals all have really good playfields on them, which is quite rare to see, especially nowadays, considering these games are getting 50, 60 years old. It's pretty crazy if you think about it. But if you are looking to play pretty much any game you could think of, I want to put an asterisk next to that because, they definitely are missing a few of the big hitters that you would usually come to find in an arcade. You kind of see this is what I was talking about here. This is gotta be a reproduction playfield, or if it's an original, it's in amazing shape. That's actually by a different company. But you can pretty much play anything you're looking for. They have a lot of, again, modern Sterns, Bally Williams games, kind of mid-70s, 80s games, electromechanical machines. You can see at the beginning of the video, there's the first pinball machine with flippers on it. They've just got a lot of cool stuff here. And, part of my mission for making these videos in the first place is to document arcades that I think cater to pinball, but I think are at least worth going to. If you ever have tried to play pinball in the wild, you don't necessarily have enough money to purchase your own game, and you're looking to play games out in the wild, it's kind of a toss-up on whether or not the game is going to be playing well, or if it's going to be playing, smooth, etc., etc. Sometimes you just kind of have to make do with what you find. And a lot of the time, it kind of frustrates me because I'm definitely the kind of player who prefers to have their machines playing the way that they were meant to be played from the factory. And with pinball, there's a lot of maintenance, a lot of upkeep, and it can be really easy as an operator to just kind of forget about it because, most people don't really know whether the game is playing right or whether it's playing wrong, especially if you don't actually play pinball yourself or you know the rules of the game specifically. And this is something that I really appreciate about this location in particular, is it's all run by people who love pinball, play pinball, and are especially into the kind of the competitive aspect of pinball. So you can pretty much guarantee that every machine here is going to be to spec. But the kind of competitive side, there were definitely a couple of machines that were set up quite mean compared to a standard game. And if you don't know what that means, it kind of means they have posts on the out lanes removed to make drains on the right and left side a little bit more frequent. There were a couple of games that were set to tournament play, so you can't get extra balls, and there's certain mystery features that are set to be the same no matter what, which again, that may or may not bug you depending on the kind of person you are, but it just depends. I don't necessarily mind it. Again, I just kind of play to play, and I also think it's kind of an interesting thing to be like, oh, well, if I was playing this in a tournament, this is how well I would do for this game or whatever it might be. But it can't be understated just how much attention to detail I think there has been in all of these games on the floor. It's a little bit hard to say, a little too early to say, especially considering that at the time of recording, this was technically not their opening. They were doing a bit of a soft opening in preparation for their grand opening, which by the time this video comes out should have already taken place or is about to take place. But with this location not being completely open just yet, there hasn't been a ton of time for people to come around and play the games and beat them up and, all that kind of stuff. And, a lot of the time you'll see arcades, they start out great. Their pinballs are really well kept and they look really good, but the maintenance kind of falls off after a little while. However, I don't necessarily think that's going to be a problem for this location, as if you are familiar with another location called The Kickback, apparently this location is kind of co-owned or semi-owned, or they're both kind of doing the same thing while working together as the owner of The Kickback. So they share a lot of people and techs and just games as well. As a matter of fact, a couple of these games are from The Kickback. I'm actually not too sure how many are. There's one game that I'll point out in the back that I actually think is from The Kickback 100%. But I'm not too sure which games are and which ones aren't. Unfortunately, I don't have that information. However, if you've seen the video that I've posted about The Kickback, their machines were also in fantastic condition and were always playing super well. So if that is to say anything, I have a feeling that this location here will most likely keep up with the maintenance for quite a while. There you can see up at the top, there's that Kickback topper. So it looks like that one was at The Kickback at some point. Changing gears a little bit, this was something that I thought was kind of interesting. I noticed that they replaced the cabinets, the classic games I have over in the corner, with an LCD screen, which I'm not a big fan of, but I know you got to do what you got to do, especially if you're not too familiar with CRT TVs. They're a bit annoying to work on. But I don't necessarily have any issues or any concerns that the maintenance at this location is going to suffer over the next couple of months. I honestly just think it's really cool that something like this actually exists in Illinois, finally. Like I said at the beginning of the video, there are a couple of missing heavy hitters at this location. There's no Whitewater. I didn't see a No Good Gophers, which I also seem to have trouble finding in the wild. I don't think I've actually documented a single one in any of these videos. It's kind of one of those games that people typically don't have on location. They're just always in private collections at this point. You can see here I was given an overview of some of the limited editions. It's kind of 50-50 on what games, like the editions, are going to be. Some of them were limited editions, some of them were pros, some of them were premiums for Stern, some of them were the special limited editions from Chicago Gaming, as you could kind of see. This was really nice. They had like a little whiteboard in the back where you could kind of give feedback and stuff like that. Something that I did kind of notice, and I don't really know if this is going to change over the course of the next couple of months or so, but the atmosphere in the location was definitely a little lacking. It's clearly just a warehouse, not necessarily a warehouse, but it's definitely just kind of an empty building. Here, real quick, this was kind of interesting. This IntelliFlip game. This is something you don't really see very often. They had very weird flippers, very interesting playfield on there. Not a normal company that you usually see. This was also apparently the first game with standard size flippers, and it was unfortunately not working, but not much you can do about that. It happens. There's another machine coming up here that I think I would like to make a mention of. Time Machine. This is a, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Zakaria machine, a European manufacturer. And if you've never seen this game, it's really cool. This little center pop bumper array actually lifts up out of the playfield to kind of create a second playfield. It's actually really, really cool. That company had a lot of unique ideas for the time. It's actually really unfortunate. There's a lot of electromechanical games and early solid state games that had some really cool ideas that were just way ahead of their time, and they didn't really perform well just because, like I said, they were just so ahead of their time. People didn't really know what to do. They were a little too complicated, I guess, for that era. But kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, I think the atmosphere in this location was lacking just a little bit. It felt kind of liminal in a way. It was really my only complaint about the space. I'm sure, though, things will slowly change and adjust as time goes on. Like, as I said, this was a walkthrough before they were technically really open, so I can't really fault them too much for that. But that would be something that I would like to see changed over the next couple of months or years, or however long they decide to keep this location open, because I think it would actually make things feel a lot more homey, a little bit more inviting for the casual player who may or may not just be kind of stopping in because they heard there was an arcade around here. Still really, really cool, though. At this point, there isn't really too much else to say about the space. Like I said at the beginning, everything was in great shape. Here, actually, this is cool, a vector. I have never found another vector, and it had a very strange coin door. I think that's the European coin door. I'm not too sure. But I have never seen another vector in the wild. I always try to find them, but they're just never around. Here's a Batman 66 Catwoman edition. Again, another kind of, special edition that you don't really see too often. As I kind of said, the editions are kind of random. You'll either get the super crazy premium edition or it's just kind of a pro. There's really no in between. Well, there are a lot of in between. Sorry, that's not true. But here's another rare one, a Black Rose. You don't see these too often. Kind of crazy to think that came out the same year as Addams Family. The difference is kind of insane. No wonder there's not many of them around. But yeah, there's not really too much else to say about the space. There's just a lot of really good pinball and a lot of fun games to play. Here is another one. I get a nice close-up of Flipper Football. This one, if you don't know anything about this, was made by Python Angelo, and it's got some interesting gameplay rules, I'll say that. It actually will swear at you, which is kind of insane, especially for the era. They were just not really caring. So this is interesting. This is a really decked out Twilight Zone that's got chrome, tons of extra lighting, mods, and mirror blades, all that kind of stuff. I'd love to do this to my Twilight Zone at some point. Maybe not as many mods, but still make it look a little nicer. I actually wonder if this is the same Twilight Zone that was documented at the Kickback a couple of months ago, just because it's got a lot of the same features that the other Twilight Zone had. Here's another interesting one, a Chicago coin, didn't really read that, but an electromechanical by Chicago Coin, so not your typical Bally or Williams or Gottlieb, which is very, very interesting. Lots of cool stuff there. They've got the two Godzillas right next to each other. Really cool, got the two different eras. You can see how much pinball has evolved over the years. And I do apologize, I didn't go look at every playfield because, like I said, everything was just really nice. I don't think you really needed to see anything. Anything I pointed at was I think worth pointing at, like this, for example. This is a Marilyn Monroe edition taxi, and those are very rare to come across. I don't think I've actually ever found one before in the wild. Very, very cool. If you don't know, they produced a couple hundred of these of the taxis with Marilyn's likeness on it, but they never got permission to do that, so they had to change it quickly through production, and they changed the character to Lola, which is the more common edition that you usually find littered throughout the wild and in-home collections, so that was really cool to see. There's no gameplay differences or anything like that, it's just a visual difference, but still really cool nonetheless. Something else that they also had a lot of were these old Sterns. The history of Stern is kind of interesting. It is technically, quote unquote, the same company as modern Stern, but not really. It's a bit complicated, but if you're interested, there's tons of videos on it or info on it on the internet if you would like to read about it. But they did have a lot of those older Sterns, like this, for example. Data East is technically also Stern. It's very complicated, but if you know, you know. And you can see they've just got tons of different eras here. They've got stuff all the way from brand new games all the way to the wedge head electromechanicals, and these are really old, and it's just amazing that they're still on the floor, still making money. You know, it's kind of insane to believe. If you told the people who designed these games that they'd be on the floor still making money this many years later, it's pretty wild. Speaking of money, you may be wondering how they do the entrance or how the games are played here. All of this is just a one-time fee. You can leave and come back whenever you want to. So everything in here is actually on free play. I believe it was $20 per person to enter. They also have like a special late night entry. If it's like an hour before closing, it's a little bit cheaper, so you don't have to pay the full amount, which is really, really cool to see. That is also something that I love about this place specifically. It is a one-time entry. Everything is free play. So if you're looking to grind a game, try to get better at a certain game, this is definitely the place to do it. You know that the game is going to be leveled correctly, it's going to be playing the right way, and it's there's not going to be any weird quirks for the most part that you would end up finding at maybe a regular mom and pop kind of shop just out in the wild here. But still really, really cool. I definitely appreciate it when places do that. There's something about putting quarters into a game over and over again just makes me feel so much more stressed, because I feel like I am, you know, I paid for this game, right? So I got to get the most out of it. But that's just not how pinball goes sometimes. It feels a lot less stressful when you can just kind of grind the game out and learn the shots, you know, get through those growing pains as quickly as you can and just kind of work through everything. Here was an Elvira's House of Horrors limited edition. One of the limited editions, there's like 4 of them. I don't even know which one that is off the top of my head personally. Someone can maybe let me know in the comments. There's a Xenon. That's another rare one you don't see too often. They made a lot of them, but you just don't see them very often nowadays, which is kind of sad because it's a really cool game for that era. I'm not usually a big fan of those kind of mid 70s, late 70s Bally games. Despite owning one, but you know, I still think that one's pretty cool. Their Indiana Jones was not working, which was unfortunate. You can see they got a couple of spooky games. That's their second one. Both spooky games were playing really well, by the way. I know spooky games are kind of difficult to keep maintained. This was just kind of a random corner in the back. I'm assuming this has to do with like maybe tournaments, or this is going to be a game where they're going to let you stream it or something along those lines. They did have a streaming rig just kind of off in the corner, so I'm assuming they're going to do events and certain things like that, which is really neat. I like that places do that. I know Logan does that quite a bit. Coming up here real fast is a game that I definitely want to mention. But we'll get there in a moment. This is another one that I've only ever seen at the Pinball Hall of Fame, which I've never done a video on. I do actually have a tour of that place from a couple of years ago that I never uploaded, but don't go to the Pinball Hall of Fame. If you want to go, there's plenty of other arcades that are way more worth your time at this point. Maybe I'll make a video about that at some point. We'll see. But again, you can just see there's not really a specific theme to everything. This was really interesting. I've never seen this game before. It's such interesting artwork. The overall vibe of the game was just very uncanny. It was kind of hard to explain. It felt like it shouldn't exist almost. Here's another older Stern. This I think is a lot of people seem to like this game. This is a bit of a classic. All right, so this is the one I was talking about. This creature. So it's a shame because whoever owns it or whatever's been done to it, somebody put the pin sound package in that game, and it is just awful. I cannot say enough mean things about it personally. I'm going to be negative right now, and it completely ruins the vibe and the atmosphere of the game, and it's really unfortunate because the game itself is playing very well, but the sound package is just ruined. I mean, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Yukon Yeti's sound package. That's just all the energy is sucked out of all the call outs, and it just sounds so cheesy. It's really unfortunate, but otherwise it's playing well. But yeah, Not to leave the video off on a negative note, but I think this place was fantastic. If you're ever looking for pinball to play, definitely check this place out. They're brand new. They could really use your business. I'm sure everybody who works here would appreciate you stopping by and taking a look. I think it is worth your time.